Reach a little higher. Jesus is there. Reach a little higher. He'll answer your prayers, and there'll be no more waiting, no burdens to bear. Reach a little higher. Jesus is there. Reach a little bit higher. Jesus is there. Reach a little higher. He's going to answer your prayers, and there'll be no more waiting. Don't you like that red bird? No more burdens to bear. Reach a little bit higher. Jesus is there. Reach a little higher. Jesus is there. Reach a little higher. He'll answer your prayer, and there will be no more waiting, no more burdens to have to bear. Reach a little bit higher. Jesus is there. Anything you want. My mother wrote that song, Reach a Little Higher. Anything you ask, whatever you desire. Lord, just name the task. That's what I will do. Oh, that's what I will do. Precious Holy Spirit, I'm in love with you. I'm in love. I'm in love. I'm in love. I'm in love with you. Greatest human who ever walked on the earth, in my opinion, was my mother. It started in a little country schoolhouse on a dance night. And my father was 16 years old, and he walked in the back door, the front door of this little schoolhouse, and it was packed. And he and his friend walked in, and a girl on the front seat, who was 13 years old, turned around and their eyes locked. The girl turned back around quickly, who happened to be my mother. And my father turned to his friend and said, "See that girl that just looked at us on the front seat?" He said, "Yes." He said, "I'm going to marry her." And his friend said, "That's my sister." And my father said, "I'm going to marry her." That night he asked her if he could walk her home several miles. I think it was 4 to 5 miles. And she agreed. He asked her if she would walk beside him on the same side of the road, and she says no. And she gives the reasons why. She said, "I don't want somebody I don't know putting their arms around me." So they walked on the opposite side of the road back home. She was 13. Her father had died the year before. She had 7 extremely rough brothers. They raised her. She had 1 sister and 7 brothers. My father had 1 brother and 7 sisters. She found out that there was 11th grade several miles away from another school. And she walked those, I think it was 6 or 7 miles, so she could go to the 11th grade. She had a passion for learning. I got my passion from her. My father had no passion for learning. He read only 1 book beside the Bible in his lifetime called Pilgrim's Progress. He did glance through a book I had written one time before. Learning was the least of his concerns. But he prayed 4 hours plus every day, prayed a lot in the Spirit. I don't remember anything about my mother growing up a whole lot, but she was 3 meals a day kind of mother. And I want to show honor to her today in a special way. I don't know how. The Redbird story is why I've got the Redbird here with me. It was a turning point in her life. Daddy was a do what he wanted man. Never heard my father raise his voice at any of us, never screamed. But he's very protective toward Mother. He never liked to talk at all, but Mother did. Mother talked endlessly, unceasing, very rarely quiet. But her words were all meaningful, purposeful, focused. She was a master listener. There's nothing she didn't ever hear and listen to, nor question. One night, I remember I was already I was in my 40s, and I bought her and Daddy a home 3 miles from me in Dallas here. And I walked in one night, and she was sitting there reading the Bible as she always was, with the light over her shoulder. And I said, "Mother, what you reading? Reading the Word, you know." And she didn't look up. She just kept staring, reading. She said, "Yes, your father said something tonight in his sermon I don't believe. And I'm going to find out if that's true." If she didn't believe you, she didn't believe you. If she thought you was a liar, you was a liar. At 2.5 years old, I crawled around the room in Big Lake, Louisiana, and I would pick up roaches, dead roaches to eat, and worms formed in my body. One day she decided she would count the worms that day that came out of my mouth and my rear end, and they were, I think it was 614 worms. They came out of my mouth that day on her shoulder, my aunt's shoulder. It's quite a story. I've shared it many times for you that haven't heard it. My father decided there was no hope for me. 2 doctors turned me down. No doctors would take my case. They said, the baby's going to die. We have no deaths on our record, so we will not accept him. One night, my father decided he was going to pray all night till I got healed. And he was lifting his hand, kneeling, praying in the Spirit, and suddenly he began to say this phrase, "Thou art a mighty God." Thou art a mighty God. And Satan, he saw like a vision, Satan holding me in his arms, and Jesus a few feet away, and Jesus walking over there. When after Daddy said that 6 or 7, 5 times or so, he said he saw a picture of Jesus like a vision, and Jesus walked over to Satan and very gently took me out of Satan's arms. And he said, I knew God had heard my prayer. I couldn't tell you how many times I said to him when he would share this, and you knew I was healed. He said, I didn't say that. I said, I knew God had answered my prayer. But you knew when Jesus took me in his arms, I was healed. The worms were gone. He said, I never said that, I said. And it agitated him that I didn't get the message. He didn't say that. Very precise in what I believe, and I'm very precise about what I don't like. And I got that from my mother. I never heard my father say much what he didn't like. But my mother would tell you in a second what she didn't like. She was a people pleaser. When it came to people, I could come in at 1 o'clock in the morning and she would get out of bed and, son, what you hungry for, son? What you hungry for? Black-eyed peas, that's what she'd fix. Fried shrimp, that's what she'd fix. Whatever. She really wanted to give every person exactly what they wanted to eat. She had no money. The highest salary Daddy made in the 99 years he was alive was $125 a week. 10 years, they never gave him a raise, 7 children, etc. He started off giving Mother, I think it was $10 a week to buy food, clothes, furniture, etc. But I'm interested today in talking about my mother, the one who brought me into the world. What are the things she did right? First, I don't know of anything she did wrong except she wouldn't let us talk about anybody, and she didn't believe anybody was bad. Kind of stupid, huh? How can you be so smart in one area and so ignorant in another? We all are. Focus creates blindness. I want to go back to I was 9 and 10 years old. We moved to Franklin, Louisiana. House note was $50 a month. Howard Houghton helped us do that and make some payments on that, and would bring over food to us from Houma, Louisiana. About an hour away, I think. My father's favorite preacher friend in the world, Howard Houghton. I still am thankful he's in my life. And I write him a check every single month, actually 2 checks every month, and will till the day he goes home to see Jesus. He's probably 96 maybe, 97, but he's one of the reasons we stayed alive when my father decided to pioneer a church on Ham Street in Franklin, Louisiana, called Franklin Full Gospel Tabernacle. That was where I received the Holy Spirit under the ministry of some friends of my father. On a Sunday night. We had pecan trees in our yard in Franklin. And we would fill up little bags and go sell them, 50 cents, things like that, up and down the street. That was the money we had at 9 and 10 years old. One night a hurricane came up. Hurricane Audrey was one of them. 500 people died in Cameron, Louisiana out of that. But John and I, my brother, saw that the pecans were falling from our neighbor's house and our neighbor's pecan tree. We rushed out there and began to throw all the pecans on our side of the property so that the next day we could pick them up, but they would be in our yard. A shadow appeared in the screen door. What are you boys doing? We just pecans, doing some pecan. What are you boys doing? She found an unanswered question to be intolerable and revealing, and I have the same problem. Throw every one of those pecans back in their yard. The Louviers. That was their name, our neighbors. So we did. She went in, don't you ever steal the neighbor's pecan. Well, we wasn't stealing them. They were out on the yard, but we were throwing them over in our, well, I guess it was. No playing games with Mama. No games. My neighbors had 2 horses. One was an Indian paint horse. I was 9 and 10, and she heard me say something to my friends at Franklin, Louisiana School on the phone. And she heard whether me or something, me tell them that I owned 2 horses. She walked in there and stood there, says, you're going to call every one of them back, one by one, and tell them you lied. They're not your, but I ride them. They're not your horses. You lied. I can still look at her and see it. You lied. And she sat there and wanted me to call Johnny Boudreaux and the others. I don't remember all the other names. Johnny's the only one I remember. And I went down the list. And I said, can I just tell them that the neighbors own the horses and I ride them? No, because you told them they were yours. You're going to tell them, I'm sorry, I lied to you about the horses. And she stood on the edge of the rounded little desk. But I got punished dearly for it. Like that. Never forgot it. Back several years ago when a psychiatrist was trying to see something was wrong with me, they said that was a major damaging point in my life when my mother told me I lied. I said, I don't think so. Yeah, that's where it, no. I said, I think it helped me to love integrity and love the truth. I do. But she was very adamant about that. When I was 8 in Waco, Texas, the teacher in the 3rd grade made us dance with each other, girls with guys, and I refused, and I was angry. And I walked in the door of our parsonage there at Waco Tabernacle. My mother was talking to a lady from the church, and I yelled out, Mother, she tried to make us dance. And I refused. And they were all angry at my rebellion, because I didn't believe in dancing. Where did I get that at 8 years old? I don't know. But Mother says, oh, son, that's all right. It's just a little school dance. And I was infuriated, and I came against her. I said, how dare you tell me that dancing is okay now? Because it's 8 years old in the 3rd grade. And she still remembered that for years, and I wanted her to. I believed what I believed. We prayed twice a day, every morning, every night. My mother was a masterful teacher. Masterful. In every church they pastored, everybody would pour out of the other rooms, and nobody wanted to listen to anybody else in the church except my mother. And you walk in the sanctuary, and her side of the building would be filled with people wanting to listen to her. They liked her. Men really liked talking to my mother. And I said, you'll find out that. Men liked talking to my mother, and they would come and laugh and talk, and Mother was a master listener while she cooked. And men would like to come. I'm thinking of Brother Luther Bowery right now. My brother's father-in-law, Leroy Vassar, loved talking to my mother. My mother was smart, very smart. What'd she do right? She wouldn't let us talk bad about our father. And if we just said something about our daddy, all I heard my entire life of 18 years is this: you boys will never be the man your father is. I heard that so many times. Now, I don't think that was the smartest thing to say. But she was determined none of us had what Daddy had. None of us have what Daddy had. Heard that a few 75,000 times. Turning points. One turning point was I was 13, as I recall, standing in the kitchen in Orange, Texas, 2605 North 10th Street. And I had reached the end. I tried very much to be like my father. I wrote him notes, left him notes from the time I was 9 years old on his desk. He had a study in every house we were in where he studied and prayed, always. And pardon me if I start crying. I'm pretty sensitive this morning, trying to figure out what would she want me to do today on her birthday. And I think I kind of know what she wants me to do. And so I've got to think about that. All I heard was how wise my daddy was. Your daddy's so wise. He's so quiet. He never says anything. I heard that so much I felt like vomiting. Your daddy's so wise. I was like 9, 10, 11, 12. So that, I wrote scriptures on a little 3x5 card, and I carried them around everywhere. A food loaded with all he knows. The tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. A man that, is a perfect man, it's all about 5 or 6 scriptures, and that's all I'd read. And when I wanted to talk, I'd stop and I'd read my card. My passion to be like my father was really immense. One day, 13, she was standing there looking at me, and I said, Mother, I don't think I can be like Daddy. I'm trying. Mother, I got to talk. I got to talk. I've got to. I did. I had to talk. Everybody admired my daddy. Everybody admired my father. Everybody. And she puzzled, and she paused and looked at me, stared. I said, I remember it like yesterday. I was 13 or so. And she said, well, maybe there's a gift involved, son. Maybe it's from the Lord. What we need to do is pray that God would give you something to say that people would want to listen to. And I paused. Give me something to say that people would want to listen to. I had started preaching 5 years before, 8 years old. Then I went to 10 and traveled some with my father and preached the first 30 minutes of his services. I have to talk. I don't like silence. Silence authorizes the imagination to create nutty stuff. I don't like silence. I don't like quiet people. I don't like people staring at me, just sitting there and never saying anything. If you're like that way, you won't like me and I won't like you. I want to know about people. I want them to tell me about their lives. I want them to tell me their opinion of what they think. That's just me. Silence to me is secrecy. And secrecy to me is a fear of discovery. There's a place for discretion. You can't say everything you feel, of course. Any idiot knows that. Even a cat knows that. I say that because we just found 3 little baby cats this morning. And I began to labor. On my 10th birthday, she gave me 2 books, The Titanic, The Sinking of the Titanic, 1912, and a book called Pilgrim's Progress, which was Daddy's favorite book. And that launched it. When I was 16, she bought me World Book Encyclopedia. Make a note of that. I was 16. I bought every encyclopedia set I could buy. Oh, I'd like to know. That was 60 years ago. I bet you they have other. I'd like to see if we could find on the internet after I teach. I laid over the bed and read hour by hour by hour by hour. I never got tired of reading, still don't. Later I went to a speed reading course called Evelyn Wood Speed Reading, and I could read 3,400 words a minute at 90% comprehension. They tested us, and so I'm a pretty fast reader. Who is this woman I call the greatest human I've ever known? This is Mother. She opens up her heart. She had a favorite. She always had her favorite child was my baby brother David. Her favorite grandchild was one of my sister's children called Misty. Dear Misty, by Mrs. J.E. Murdoch, introduction. What a title for a book. It was November the 28th, 1993. Paul and I were talking in the bathroom, and we rehearsed some words we had heard from people. Many had said, write a book. Our lives are so full. I remarked, no one would listen to me. Maybe Misty. She really loved Misty. She became a different person around Misty. The inspiration came to write a book and called it Dear Misty. Let everyone who reads it for admonition or advice replace Misty's name with their own. Dear Mike, dear Clint Ross, dear Tycha, dear Valerie, dear Jacques Myberg, dear Zachary, dear Renetta, dear Michael, Dear Paul Wright, dear Stacy, let everyone who reads this. Misty is my granddaughter I have counseled with many times. Finally, I took her to the school counselor, and we were trying to persuade Misty to stay in school. But Misty, with a persuasive grin on her face, always had all the answers, until I almost felt like I had chastised her with my hand and keep her until she had questions instead of answers. You know, when you're 14, you really have all the answers, huh? Anyway, I left the school board office and took Misty home. I felt strange. I went to the drugstore and asked them to take my blood pressure. I knew something was wrong, and sure enough, my blood pressure was very high. The attendant wanted me to do something fast. It was then I prayed and committed Misty to God's care and her own decisions. Being 73 years old, I could not let my blood pressure get so high over someone I could not control. And she italicized these words. I'm seeing Mike Murdoch all over this book. You could not let your blood pressure get so high over someone I could not control. You have a son you can't control, you have no influence. They don't listen to you. Misty became a person who evaded school corrections, but she's always very considerate when she sees me. She's always trying to be my cane to walk. She is always saying, Grandma, I love you more than anyone else in the world. It makes me a little uncomfortable, but I know her words are coming from my heart. So, Misty, I'll try writing a book to you about Paul and me. Maybe you'll read it and learn. Chapter 1. When I met Paul, he was another girl's boyfriend. I was sitting in the schoolhouse at a Saturday night singing, and lo and behold, he came and sat down beside me on the pew. I was scared this other girl would get mad. He tried to talk to me, but he was just a flighty kid, and I was afraid because I was taught, you do not talk to another girl's boyfriend. I just had to let it work out. In that day, they called boys like that jelly beans. We were warned to be careful about jelly beans wanting attention. He walked me home that night after the services. Because I wouldn't let him put his arm around me as we walked, he made me walk across the road. Because I wouldn't let him put his arm around me as we walked, he made me walk across the road. I felt so ashamed, but I didn't want to be wrapped in somebody's arms I didn't know. I was 13, he was 16. He called the next weekend and tried to come out to the country where I lived to see me. I didn't know whether he should come to see me or not. But he was coming on his horse to see his sister with a friend of his who went to school with me. They came several Saturday nights like that, which began a courtship of 13 months. During these 13 months, he asked me several times to marry him. We'd run hot and cold. Sometimes he would wait so long to write or come to see me that I'd cry so much my brothers would get worried with me. One night he came and said, now or never. I thought I had to go then if I wanted to marry him, so I went. I was very young, 14, and Paul and I, that's what she called Daddy to the grandkids, walked to town to get married. My mother did not want to see me go. But like you, Misty, I said, Mother, I'm going anyway. This is the time. He changes his mind so much. He told me if I didn't marry him now, it was never. So dear old mother, my mama, my mother's grandmother, mother, looked in her purse to see what she could give me for a trousseau, as we called it. She only had a few dollars, and she gave me her few dollars and wished me the best. My father had died when I was 12. My brothers were not at home that night. If they'd have been there, they would have never allowed me to go get married. Only Mama was there, so I went. We walked 8 miles into town to Paul's sister's house the day before the wedding to get the license to be married the next day. I had seen his sister only once. I spent the night in her guest room, which had high ceilings and electric lights. My family didn't have all that. We didn't have any electric lights. I sat in that big room alone, Misty, wondering about my future. I was afraid to turn the lights off. Daylight came, and I was glad. I met his sister and 2 boys who were 10 and 12. She had a little car with a rumble seat, so we went off to meet my future in-laws, Mr. and Mrs. Murdoch. We arrived at their house at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. His mother was resting. His sister Eva said, Mama, here's John's girlfriend. My mom said, what is she doing here? I paid no attention to the sarcasm. My mind was made up to accept and love his folks. Paul told his daddy, we're going to get married. His dad asked how he was going to take care of us. Daddy said, we'll just stay here. Misty, I was concerned about writing this book for fear some would call it an old wives' tale. But Misty, you are different, Misty, because you are looking for the right road. So I'm writing about my own experiences in life to help all the Misties who read this book to discern what is right. God will give you. Misty, God will give you the wisdom you need. Ask Him. Not all are the same. Look to God. She tells how she took my father's words wrong, that she didn't understand his words about serving God. And she said, Misty, when you find a good man, you need to understand what they're saying and what is real to them. Misty, when you talk to a man, watch your words, Misty. Observe their reactions. There's much to learn and understand about talking to men. Paul's aunt was a good teacher. She taught me how to pray. There's no book in the world like this book. My mother could talk like nobody. If I had one person on the earth to talk to, my mother just had the perfect reactions. I found my mother a masterful conversationalist. To get along with my father took a miracle, because mother had an opinion too. My mother felt like her opinion was as important as my daddy's. She was the greatest human ever met, ever knew, ever known. She's the only person I'd ever said at 13 years old, Mother, I've got to talk. I got to talk. And I remember her staring at me. In a few seconds, she says, Baby, there's a gift involved. One night, she sat there. I was like, probably in my 40s. They had moved close to me. And she said, Son, I've been hearing you say a whole lot about the Boaz anointing. This is my mother. Give me 5 more minutes. This is my mother. Married to a man who prayed 4 hours plus every day. A man who nobody could tell him what to do. My father didn't believe in anybody. Nobody. Except my mother. That's very true. Hadn't thought about that till right now. He liked Howard Holton. He believed Howard Holton was okay. My mother. His favorite child in the family was my sister Barbara. She was the first. She sung when she's 3 and 4 and 5 years old. She sung in street services before my mother and daddy would play and sing and preach. My daddy was a genius in basketball, and that's another world there. My father just didn't believe in anybody. The people he believed in was his twin sister, Flo Alice. And when she was around, my daddy was a different person. He just giggled and laughed. And we never saw my father like that ever in our lifetime. But when she came to visit, about every 2 or 3 years, he was close to his twin sister. She was a preacher also. My mother said, Son, she said, I keep hearing you talk about Boaz anointing. And she said, Son, I don't really understand it. Said, your daddy prays every day, all day long. But all the money goes to your house. And I don't really understand that. My daddy was very tight with his money. He gave Mother very, very little. Very little. And he was very careful. I wouldn't call my father a giver at any level. He wasn't stingy, he just didn't have any money. And Mother says, Son, all the money goes to your house. She said, I've never seen anything like it. She said, Daddy prays for hours all day, but all the money goes to your house. And she says, I'm going to try something. I heard you talk about the $1,000 seed over and over. And I've saved my money. And she was writing me a check to my ministry for $1,000. I said, oh, Mother, no, I won't take your money. She said, you got to. I want what you've got. That's what my mother said. She said, Son, you really have something about money nobody has in our family. I don't understand it. Your daddy prays, but no money comes. But you pray or you give. And she said she got a $1,000 check, and she had written it out, Mike Murdoch Ministry. And I said, Mother, I want to take that. She says, you got to, because I want the anointing that's on you. I want that, son. I've never seen anything like that. I took her $1,000. I took her $1,000 check, and I hated receiving it. I hated it. I said, Father, I received this $1,000 from my mother. I ask you to bless her and honor her. Bring it back to her over and over. show her about the $1,000 seed. What you did for me. What you did for me. And 2 weeks later, I went to the hills of Pennsylvania. I preached on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Monday, they came to pick me up to take me to the airport to fly home. Jerry Coakley and his wife Karen. You want to write that down? I don't know if they're alive. Jerry Coakley. He called me and said, Brother Mike, the board had a meeting yesterday about your mother and father. We were so impressed at how your mother and father raised you in God's presence. We want to start blessing your mother and father every month. We want to give them an offering every month. Would you come by and pick up an offering for your mother and daddy? He had never met them. And they come out with 2 checks. One check for $2,000. It was a check for, said your mama gets $1,000 and your daddy gets $1,000. I can't hardly handle all this, family. And I went back home and gave mother and daddy $1,000 each. I said, Mama, they've never met y'all. But they said, because you taught me the ways of God, they will honor you. And people started blessing my mother from her $1,000 seed. You don't have to believe me, family. You can believe anybody you want to. But boy, my mother believed in me. She believed in me. Very tough. When I was 17, I came back home from a date with a girl. It was about 10 o'clock, 11. I walked in the door. 3814 Swanee Street, Lake Charles. I can still see her. She said, your face is red. Your face is red. Whoa, what are you doing? What have you been doing? That was my mother. I'm going to say something real crude here, even though I know that I have 3 preachers that tape everything I say every day to try to hurt me. There's 3 preachers I've known for years, and they try to destroy me. But she would knock on the door and ask me what I was doing. She would say some things I better not say, because these 3 preachers they're full of devils. They're full of demon spirits, but they're in my world. This is my mother. It mattered to her about us living right. I came in one night, 17. 2 old men, 2 elderly men had torn me up that night after service in a restaurant. Tell me all about my preaching, how I preached. Oh, they just said all kind of stuff. Said I preached too long, and I was 17. I said, Mom, I decided I'm going to leave the ministry. I'm not going to preach anymore. I can still see her. Says, God will get you. God will get you. You better know the fear of God. You better do what God says. God's going to get you. You can quit if you want to. God's going to get you. You're called, and you know you are. And that was the response I got. She bought me a mandolin when I was 8 years old in Frank, Louisiana. She saw me looking in a magazine, and I loved them. Write that down. I'll play the mandolin sometime for everybody here. I hadn't played that in years. She would rather hear me play the mandolin than the piano. Very much so. Very much so. She loved my piano. She's not my piano player, but she loved my mandolin because of her. She's the one that bought me an Acrosonic Baldwin Acrosonic piano. She's the one so I would learn to play the piano. She put it there, bought it for me, out of her little money that she had. My mother, nobody comparable to my mother. Nobody comparable to my mother. Very bold, look you in the eye, let you know if she thought you were lying. I don't think you're telling me the truth. I have a lot of that in me. But I trusted her. I got trusted. I don't know if my father loved me as much as anybody. He just wasn't that kind of person. He just wasn't that kind of person. My father had no love talk in him. In fact, just a few weeks before he died at 99 years old, I was massaging his feet, and he woke up in my office, and he looked at me, and he may have had dementia, Alzheimer. He had some of that. And he saw me massage his feet, which I'd done more than once. And he said, "Son, you got a sweetheart, don't you? You have a sweetheart, don't you, son?" Huh? And he looked so shocked. I bought him houses and cars his whole life. He said, "Son, you got a sweetheart, don't you?" I said, "I hope so, Daddy." I want to share we'll show you on the screen how to sow into my ministry. I've talked too long. Her book, Dear Misty, is out of this world. There's so much real. She tells about the red bird story. She tells about Kadana coming. Mama constantly talked about each of the kids, about each other. I want to say this. Mother would not let any of us children talk bad about each other. And I felt that that's important. I hadn't followed it, but I think that's key. If I said something about Kadana, she said, "That's the most beautiful child I ever had. None of you looked even close to her beauty." She talked about Deborah. Said, "Deborah's the best worker I've had in the whole family. Nobody in the whole family can compare with Deborah." And Deborah went down the list. Mother went down the list. Mother would buy my brother, David, my baby brother, 2 horses. She wouldn't ever buy me a horse, would never give me a horse, never buy me one. Really loved John. John was the absent daddy when Daddy couldn't be at home, my older brother. Ways to sow into our ministry, I'll show you. Anybody that sows any seed today at any level, I'm sending you Mother's book, Reach a Little Higher. Her book, Dear Misty. Any seed that you, in honor of my mother, we'll use the seed for our TV ministry, our radio ministry in Israel. I want to show you what I'm sending to you. My father's book, 488 pages, called John JEM 12, Truth Out in the Open. Every poem my father ever wrote, and they are profound. I'm sending you this book. I'm sending you Dear Misty, book JEM02. I'm sending you Mother's Reach a Little Higher, and it's full of wisdom keys about mothers. The skill of the teacher decides the passion of the learner. What is the future you're training for? Who is training you? How are they training you? What is your investment? Wherever you're struggling, you're untaught. The unwilling or the untrainable. The greatest things from me and my mother's conversations are in this book. I never correct where I see disagreement. I only correct where I see a learner. The ignorant are trainable. The stupid are not. Ignorance is when you don't know something. Stupid is when you show no honor for those who do know. Peace is something you create. Peace is not a gift. It's something you create. Joy is the reward for loving someone. Learning is not a place of arrival. It's a place of beginning of changes. Learning's where the changes begin. I talked about my $18,000 dog experience and a free puppy. A learner will never be enslaved by the opinion of others. A learner will never be homeless, ever. A learner will never be homeless. Love is an investment. That's why love has great expectations. When you love somebody, some of the most profound teachings, I have 111 left of these. That's it. That's it. We're going to downloads. I'm sending these 3 books from my mother and father for any seed you feel led to sow. You have to call before 6 o'clock tonight. 817-78, book number, seed number is 844-789 seed. I want to cry. I'm going to call these Mother's 3-pack. If you want to put that on the screen. This is my Mother's 3-pack. This is my background. Any seed you feel led to sow, that's up to you. But ask for my Mother's 3-pack. I want to cry. Her book's going to turn you upside down. Dear Misty, I just got inspired to write my books to somebody who I believe listens to me. Not very many are there in it. Chapter 9. Oh yes, Misty, I was just like you too. I wanted to do my own thing. I didn't want to have to need God. But Misty, God has put that need in us. Misty, nobody can fill that spot in your life but God. We just got to thank Him. So as I continue my story, I want you to read my scriptures. Father, thank you. 844-789-7333. Is Gabriella back? Can she bring the box to me? Mother's 3-pack. 488 pages. Everything my father ever wrote is in this. Please write down the book number, 844. There will never be another day like this. There will never be another day like this. And I know that. I know that. My mother was walking integrity. Daddy was very closed-mouthed, very secretive. My mother was very open. Okay. I love y'all. Hope you call. Any seed you plant, call it an honor seed for my mother. I appreciate it. Bye-bye.